Excuse me, cat. Elfie. Oh, you got that book?
Yeah.
Whoops. Alexa, turn off. Welcome to Pillow Hour. I'm Duke,
I'm Nat.
where I read to Nat while she does her treatments for her early onset glaucoma.
Yep.
And we're switching gears. We're going to read The War of the Roses because it's out in theaters now, and this is the original book, I believe.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to read it because I like the original movie, which you just saw for the first time.
And we saw the remake.
And the remake, and that's
which is
excellent
awesome.
too. Yeah. So, The War of the Roses by Warren Adler. Now a major motion picture.
All right.
Let's see. Just jumps right into it. Jonathan Rose sat on an aisle seat, a few rows back from the podium, his long legs stretched out on the battered wood floor. The parlor was less than half full. No more than 30 people. Behind the auctioneer, strewn around like the aftermath of a bombing, were the assorted possessions of the family Barker, the last of whom had lived long enough to make some of the junk valuable. It's a genuine Boston rocker, the auctioneer droned, his voice cracked and pleading as he pointed to a much-abused Windsor-style rocking chair, made by Hitchcock, Alfred and Company, one of the finest names in chairs. He looked lugubriously, you're going to have to help me with these words, around the silent room. No longer expectant. Damn, he snapped. It's a genuine antique. $10, a lady's voice cackled. She was sitting in the front row, bundled in a dirty Irish sweater. $10, the auctioneer protested. Look at the tapered back spindles, the scrolled top rail, the shaped seat. All right, $12.50, the lady huffed. She had been buying most of the furniture offered, and to Jonathan, it seemed like the auction was being held solely for her benefit. This whole thing stinks, a voice hissed. It came from a veined Yankee face beside him. The rain's mucked it all up. She's got the antique store in Provincetown. She'll get it for next to nothing and sell it off to the tourists for 10 times as much. Jonathan nodded, clicking his tongue in agreement, knowing that the rain was his ally as well. Most of the tourists who had crowded into Chatham on Thursday and Friday, hoping for a pleasant Memorial Day weekend at the beach, had left by mid-morning. At the Breaking Wave, where Jonathan was a summer waiter, the dining room for the Sunday lunch looked and felt like an off-season resort, and his tips matched the mood. But the weather on Cape Cod was, at best, uncertain. He was used to it. All through undergraduate school at Harvard, he had worked summers at the Breaking Wave, amusing himself at the antique auctions on those days he couldn't get to the beach. He was especially fond of estate sales held at old cottages once the owners had died. Rarely could he afford to buy anything, although occasionally he picked up a Staffordshire figure for a song. He had grown up being watched over by 4 Staffordshire pearl-ware female figurines representing the 4 seasons garbed in décolleté white robes. They peered out of his mother's dining room china cabinet, emblems of his father's war service in England. Once he had broken spring while removing the object in a clandestine pre-puberty compulsion to feel the little lady's tits. The figure had slipped out of his grasp and was decapitated on the floor.
Oh, no.
Always good with his hands, Jonathan had done a magnificent glue job, and his mother was none the wiser.
So I'll tell you something.
Yeah.
So growing up, my mother used to have these figurines.
Mm-hmm.
They're called Yadro. I
Okay.
think they're from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
They were like very expensive, like porcelain, and she used to have them in a big glass like cabinet like that on display.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And you tried to touch some of the...
No, I never touched a single one because I knew if I touched a single one and it broke, I'd be in big trouble.
And you didn't have the glue skills that Jonathan did?
There's no way you were gluing that thing back together.
This cat is going to bother your screen. Over time, as if out of guilt, he had acquired a modest Staffordshire collection of his own, some sleeping child figures, and the more commonly found sailor with his wife and child. He had done a bit of research on Staffordshire pottery as well, and although his figures were comparatively cheap, he suspected that they would increase in value someday. The auctioneer reached for a figure representing a boxer and held it above his head. Then he read from the spec sheet. Staffordshire pearlware, the pugilist crib, champion of England in 1809. Jonathan stiffened. The figure of Crib was white. There was a black figure as well, of the boxer Molyneux, an ex-slave who had fought Crib twice, losing both times. Both pugilists had been immortalized in caricature drawings on pottery and through figures like these. They were always depicted together, facing each other, fists raised. The idiot is breaking the pair, he thought, appalled by the auctioneer's ignorance. $15, the lady in the first row shouted. The auctioneer looked at the figure and shrugged. Jonathan knew it wasn't a work of art, merely souvenir quality, which probably sold for tuppence when first made by some anonymous backstreet potter. The auctioneer glared contemptuously at the audience, obviously wanting to hurry the sale. I have 15, he croaked. Going at 15. Do I hear 16? Jonathan raised his hand. I have 16, the man said, showing a sliver of optimism. The lady in the dirty... Get out of here, Brett. The lady in the dirty Irish sweater turned in her chair. Her face looked like soggy dough, her red-tipped nose runny. 17, she cackled. I have 17, the auctioneer said, his eyes shifting back to Jonathan. Jonathan raised 8 fingers, clearing his throat as well. The heavy woman huffed and shifted in her chair. Reaching into his pocket, he nervously pulled out his money. He had $37, his total weekend tip income. If he got Crib, he wanted to have some left for Molyneux. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. 19, the lady boomed out. A gust of rain spattered against the windows. The auctioneer ignored it, warming to his task. Jonathan's heart pounded. Bitch, he muttered, before shouting 20. Idiot, the woman rebuked, turning to fix on him her gaze of utter contempt. I have 20. 20 once. A thin smile of satisfaction grew on the auctioneer's lips as he looked at the woman. He raised the gavel. 20 twice. Jonathan held his breath. Down went the gavel. Sold. God damn, Jonathan muttered, energized by the experience, savoring the flush of victory. Well, you beat the old cow, the Yankee beside him twanged. Molyneux was brought forward a few moments later. Jonathan felt his guts tighten. It's a pair, he told himself, pumping up his resolution. He peeled off what he had spent on Crib and tucked the money safely in his pocket, clutching the remaining bills in a sweaty hand. There were only $17 left. This is another Staffordshire pugilist, the fighter Molyneux, a former slave who boxed in England in the early 19th century. $10, the lady in the dirty Irish sweater shouted. She did not turn to look behind her. Jonathan shouted out, 11. Please, he begged in his mind, sensing surrender to his own determination. He had no business squandering his money. 12, a voice chirped from behind him. He turned quickly, startled by this new sound. 2 rows down, a girl with long chestnut hair flowing from under a sailor cap smiled primly, a flush on her apple-contoured cheekbones. Shit, Jonathan mumbled as the auctioneer responded. I have 12. 12.50, the girl responded without hesitation. Don't they know it's a pair? Jonathan whispered to himself, as if her bids were a form of vengeance. He held up his fist, in which he clutched the sweaty bills. I have 13, the auctioneer called, staring directly at the girl. She's hesitating, Jonathan thought. Do I hear 13.50? I have 13.50, the auctioneer declared. Jonathan was sure the auctioneer was playing games. Jonathan scowled at him, then turned and rebuked the girl with his eyes. 14, he growled. His throat was tightening. He felt the tension in his stomach. Damn bitch, he cried inside himself. It made no sense at all to break up the pair. The auctioneer looked toward the girl. I have 15, the auctioneer announced. The audience grew restless. 16, Jonathan croaked. 17, the girl responded quickly, her voice carrying over the din. It's a damn pair, Jonathan yelled, shaking his head. He opened his palm and unrolled the bills. 17, that was it. Not even additional change. He turned again and looked at the girl. She was calm, almost serene, but there was no mistaking her determination. I have 17, the auctioneer said, staring at Jonathan, his glare intimidating. 18, Jonathan shouted, his voice crackling. The room seemed to grow quieter. The sound of the pounding rain faded. Jonathan felt sinister, manipulative. He didn't have the money. His breath came in short gasps. 19, the girl responded. 20, he shot back. The girl hesitated. A lump rose in Jonathan's throat. He looked at her again. Their eyes met. There was no mistaking her intensity. 21, she snapped. All right, he decided, thankful for the reprieve. She's a tough bitch. I have 21 once, the auctioneer paused, watching him. Jonathan felt his blood rise. So, I'm a coward, he told himself, wallowing in his humiliation. Twice, the auctioneer shrugged. Down with the gavel. Sold. Jonathan sat through the rest of the auction in a funk. Hell, I should have borrowed the money, he thought. What is the point? By the end of the auction, he had calmed down, and when he went to collect his Staffordshire, he confronted her. It's a pair, he pouted. He had been eyeing the Molyneux figure exquisitively, and she drew it closer to herself. They go together. That's not the way they were sold, the girl responded, her widely set green eyes flashing. He didn't know what he was doing, he said, as they walked out of the parlor, huddling in the crowded hall as everyone opened umbrellas and prepared to walk into the rain. All I had was $17. I deliberately bid it up. As soon as he uttered the words, he felt foolish and vindictive. I got carried away, he quickly added, hoping to blunt his pettiness. So did I, she admitted. You're stubborn. My father says tenacious, she smiled, showing even teeth. The smile warmed him. Suppose I'd bid it up to 100. I was worried you would. You would have gone along? Jonathan's antagonism faded. I hate to think about it, she smiled. He returned her smile and moved with her towards the doorway. Why did you want it? He asked. She hesitated, coy now. He felt the give and take of flirtation. It's for one of the girls at the Chatham Arms. I'm a baking assistant for the summer. The girl's brother is in Golden Gloves. She's one of the maids. Takes a lot of crap. I thought this would be nice instead of a tip.
Hmm.
Jonathan was touched, ashamed to break up a pair, even for a good cause. He immediately felt guilty. She opened her umbrella and stepped into the rain. He ducked under it, although it didn't do either of them much good. Hope you don't mind. I'm a sportsmanlike winner, she said. I'm a lousy loser. And the Chatham Arms was on the other side of town, and they walked together through the main street. His hand covered hers as they jointly clutched the umbrella against the wind. The rain came at them horizontally, and they finally took refuge in the doorway of a closed toy store. By then, they had traded information. Hey, cat!
What does the cat do?
It's fucking with this. That's Ashley's thing.
Oh,
Never mind. So, whoops, sorry.
it's okay.
By then, they had traded information. Her name was Barbara Knowles. She was a student at Boston University. She had wanted to spend the summer as a volunteer for Kennedy to help him win against Nixon, but she couldn't afford that. Anyway, I like baking. It's fun, and the pay's good, she continued, unless you spend it all. He pointed to the Molyneux, now wrapped in soggy newspapers. You too, she laughed. He noticed that her eyes were actually hazel, turning from green to brown in the late afternoon light. I guess I just like old things. They'll be worth more than money someday, like these figures. You can't eat them. Unfortunately not. Better stay away from auctions, he continued. Harvard law is damned expensive. I start in the fall. My folks pay tuition, but I pay living expenses. They were huddled together in the tiny storefront entrance. When she spoke, he felt her warm breath against his cheek. A current was passing between them, something wonderful and mysterious. Don't give him away, he said, conscious of his pleading tone. It was, after all, a symbol of their meeting. Not yet. It's mine, she pouted with mock sarcasm, holding it over his head like a club. One isn't much good without the other, he said. It's a twosome. I beat you fair and square, she said. Well, the battle isn't over yet, Jonathan whispered. He wondered if she had heard his voice above the beat of the rain. Not yet, she agreed, smiling. She had heard him.
Mm.
That's the end of chapter 1.
There's a lot of foreshadowing, you know?
In this particular, unlike the movie, she was immediately leaving the island, remember?
Oh, right.
In the first one.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways, yes, that was the end of the first chapter.
But I just meant there was foreshadowing in the sense that, like, the two figures are boxing each other,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Yeah, what was it in the movie that they were, I don't remember what he was trying to,
I can't remember what they
obtain.
were bidding on, but it wasn't a pair of figurines.
And the second movie doesn't have any of that.
No, the second movie they don't do anything with auctions.
All right.
But she is a chef, and her specialty is baking.
That's true. All right. Chapter 2. Through the dormer window of her third-floor room, Anne saw him open the side door of the garage. Holding his toolbox, he moved over the flagstone walk toward the house. A reddish spear of light from the slipping September sun bounced off the metal tools arranged neatly in the box. Startled by the sudden glint, she moved back out of the dormer's niche, her heart pounding. Hoping she was out of his field of vision, she watched him pause and reattach a string of English ivy that had fallen from the high cedar fence. The fence formed a backdrop for a line of still maturing arborvitaes, some kind of plant, I imagine, that separated the back garden from the neighbors. Seldom could she study him so minutely, free of her self-consciousness and clumsy shyness. Besides, she was certain that Jonathan Rose viewed her as a country bumpkin from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. That is, if he ever took the time to assess her seriously. In his beige corduroys and blue plaid shirt, he looked oddly miscast as a man who worked with his hands in his spare time, even in his basement workroom, surrounded by his neatly hung power tools, his nuts, bolts, nails, and screws and glass containers, his circular saw, lathe, and myriad mechanical gewgaws. He could not shed the image of his regular calling, a Washington attorney,
Mm.
or as he liked to characterize himself, just a plodding barrister. The deepening orange light set off his wavy, prematurely salty gray hair, which he still wore long, despite the new convention. His lightly speckled, thick mustache and jet black eyebrows gave him the look of an angelicized Omar Sharif. The
Mm.
resemblance, what's that?
That's interesting because that doesn't look anything. Who isn't it? Michael Douglas?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that wouldn't look like Michael Douglas at all. So
Even an
they
ounce.
definitely changed. Not even an ounce. Yeah, so they definitely changed.
Yeah, the one. You're done with 2 treatments already?
Yeah,
These are going slower. That's how many you got two, a 10 minute and a 15-minute left?
yeah.
Okay. The resemblance, however, quickly dissipated when his wide smile flashed and his blue eyes caught the right light, betraying his Irish antecedents. Jonathan could have surmised.
Antecedents?
Maybe, yeah. Sorry, some of these words I've never heard.
Hmm.
What is it? What does antecedents mean?
Well, I thought it was like the people
Like
come.
ancestors, type of thing?
Yeah.
If Jonathan could have surmised the extent of her interest, he would have been flattered, of course, but appalled. Anne herself was appalled. The sensation had crept up on her, like muggers who, she had been warned, prowled the Washington streets. Not there in the Colorama section, of course, where there were almost as many embassies and legations as private residences, and therefore fully protected by a vast army of special police. Anne's newly acquired snobbery took her by surprise. She tore her eyes from the dormer window and decided that she was afflicted with an adolescent crush, a condition hardly worthy of a 22-year-old woman. Despite the warmth in her initiation into the Roses household, Anne was merely a glorified au pair. The label, she knew, was unfair to them. They tried so hard to make her part of the family, and the free room and board payment for vaguely defined services had given her the wherewithal to pursue her master's in history at Georgetown University. Looking suddenly about her room, Anne could not repress a joyful giggle as she recalled the tantalizing offer of room and board in the classified pages of the Washington Post. Miss Rose had described each piece of furniture in the house with the confident authority of a museum guide. Anne had had no knowledge of antiques, yet living among these pieces of tangible history had piqued her interest, and she would wonder how other past lives had fared amongst these objects. In one corner of the room was a sleigh bed, circa mid-19th century. Beside it stood an inlaid mahogany empire table on which stood an Art Nouveau,
Nouveau. Yeah, Nouveau.
yeah, close enough, Tiffany lamp, guarded by a rustic Staffordshire porcelain milkmaid who had wandered in from the downstairs collection. On one wall was a chest-on-chest festooned with intricate ormolu. Okay, now I definitely don't know that. Ormolu. It's in italics too.
Ormolu.
Ormolu.
No, I'm not familiar with it either.
And a French biblioteca with glass doors. Near the dormer was an English folding desk on which rested a hurricane lamp. We get a knee-jerk reaction every time we get near an antique auction, Barbara Rose had explained. We even met at one. We're antique junkies. There's no more room to put things. It's fantastic, Anne had replied. We've been at it for years, Barbara had told her, but they say that people who collect never really stop. Maybe we're afraid to. Her voice had trailed off as if she were wary of the sudden intimacy. Anyway, she had chirped, recovering her lightness, you can commune with all the ghosts of times past. With pleasure, Anne had replied. My major is history. But if the room part of her salary was awesome, the board part staggered her. Anne remained endlessly fascinated with the Rose's kitchen. It was a carpeted rectangle lined with French provincial walnut cabinetry and rough stucco walls designed to resemble a French country kitchen. Built into the walls were two double sinks, two double ovens, one electric, one gas, a huge refrigerator, a matching freezer, and a dishwasher. Also built in were tiers of open shelving filled with cookbooks, bottles, spices, canned goods, pots, pans, plates, jugs, trays, and bowls of various shapes and sizes. Huge drawers containing silver and flatware were fitted below the countertops. Shiny copper pots and pans hung on hooks in corners and cubbies. Arranged on the countertops were a microwave oven, two blenders, a coffee maker, a toaster oven, and a warming drawer. In the center of the kitchen was a large rectangular island over which hung a huge hood. Built into the island was another stainless steel sink, two 4-burner stoves, electric and gas, a battalion of utensils, colanders, ladles, spatulas, a wooden box filled with knives and slots, a wide marble top built into the cutting board counter, and an electric kitchen center designed to accommodate a variety of mixing bowls and whatnots.
Jesus,
Yeah,
that
I
is
love
one
this
hell of a
kitchen.
kitchen.
I know, I want it. With each inspection, it was an inventory that never failed to expand in Anne's eyes. And it was not, I think this is even grander than both movies put together.
Yeah.
Remembering her mother's broke down, noisy refrigerator, the gas stove with a pilot light that never seemed to work, and chipped and stained porcelain fixtures, Anne always felt as though she had wandered into a fantasy world. I cook, Barbara had announced, the understatement carefully honed from long use. Anne had followed her into an alcove serving as a storage pantry where a large, humming, temperature-controlled wine vault stood. We planned and built it together, Barbara explained to an astonished Anne. Jonathan's a whiz at fixing and making things, and I've got a degree in plumbing from the School of Hard Knocks. Anne remembered she was as eager to make a good impression as Barbara was to appear ingratiating. Yes, there had been a certain indelibility about their first meeting, despite the confusing, information-packed grand tour. Barbara had given detailed descriptions of every piece, particularly in the dining room. Duncan Fife, she said, rapping her knuckles on the shiny table. Queen Anne chairs, and that Rococo?
Rococo.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Rococo monstrosity is my favorite. She had pointed to an elaborate candelabrum, sorry, both, with room for more than a dozen candles. Decadent, don't you think?
It sounds decadent.
Mhm. I guess they knew their creations would outlive human beings, Anne replied, patting a marble top credenza for emphasis. At that first meeting, Barbara's curvaceous figure was encased in tight jeans and a t-shirt on which the word Hausfrau was stretched tautly over her ample bosom, an intimidating statement. What's that mean? Hausfrau, it must be German?
German. I'm not sure what it means.
She possessed, as a miner's daughter like Anne would observe, Slavic good looks, deep-set hazel eyes peering cautiously behind apple-contoured cheekbones under a broad forehead. Her chestnut hair was cut to cascade down either side of her head like a wild brook, almost to her broad shoulders. They served as a sturdy crosspiece for her magnificent bosom. That's the second time they mentioned bosom in one paragraph.
Yeah, well.
So we are to assume this lady has ample bosoms. Everybody, just so everybody knows.
Everybody knows.
I'm going pro, Barbara had announced, as if addressing Anne's sense of awe. She had flashed a wide, ingenuous smile, growing momentarily wistful. I've got the talent and the facilities, that's for sure. Her attention had suddenly departed from Anne, as if there were someone else she had to convince. But when her focus had returned, she explained that she had just sold a batch of her special cassoulet to an embassy in the neighborhood, and her pâté was becoming a staple at the French market. It's just a humble beginning, she had said, but that's why I need a little help with the kids. Just a watchful eye, a little tidying up, perhaps some help from me, nothing heavy. A maid comes in to do the hard stuff. Teenagers need a maternal surrogate when mom's busy in the kitchen. She laughed nervously, which put Anne at ease. She wasn't the only one with anxieties about the new arrangement. As they had talked, she lifted Mercedes, the spade Siamese, from one of the upper open shelves, wedged between a can of Crisco and a box of brown sugar. The cat snuggled against her hair and briefly shared an Eskimo kiss before jumping to the floor, scurrying off to a sunny adjoining room that appeared to be filled with plants. There's an overgrown standard schnauzer whose bark is worse than his bite that you'll meet shortly. He spends the day servicing the local bitches. Mostly he obeys only Jonathan. He says that's because they both share the same drives. She had flashed her smile again and giggled a throaty laugh.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mhm. The reference to testosterone offered a female bond, and from that moment, sisterly affection began to ferment between them. Anne's confidence rose. The exchange had underlined that first impression. Barbara had mentioned in passing that the Schnauzer's name was Benny, but it was Eve, their 16-year-old daughter, who had explained to Anne the not so subtle connection. Mercedes Benz. Of course, I should have caught it immediately. Anne had actually felt embarrassed. No reason to, and really, it's just one of those very inside family things. It was Dad's idea. Reticence marked their first encounters. But Anne thought that was understandable, since the assignment for an au pair was to watch over a 16-year-old seemed an insult by definition. Eve's first move was to give Anne the shock treatment. I keep my stash of pot behind Louisa May Alcott, the girl explained as she introduced Anne to her room. The decor, a deliberate attempt on Eve's part to stem the tide of antiques that had engulfed the house. Every piece in her room seemed ruffled with flowery prints, except for the pink bookcases and Andy Gibb poster. Her closet was a mess, and school books were scattered under the bed. And I'm on the pill, Eve abruptly added, watching Anne's face for a reaction. Anne's features were calculatingly immobile. She herself wasn't on the pill for two reasons: health and infrequency. She wasn't shocked, although she had made a mental note as to how much lower the starting age was now. As if to buttress her rebel image, Eve offered Anne a cigarette. Then Eve lit up and inhaled deeply. Screw cancer, Eve shrugged. To Anne, the bravado was a dead giveaway. Eve wasn't a brat at all, just unsure, like most teenagers and adults. I don't smoke, Anna replied. I chew. Eve's giggle, like her mother's laugh, seemed to break the tension. Really? Eve had exclaimed, showing her age. She was, Anne observed, vulnerable and gawky, still underdeveloped and willowy, but with all the promise of inheriting her mother's sensuousness. With her father's blue eyes and rich, thick hair, she would soon be quite a beauty. Anne knew instinctively. We never met the kids at all, did we? In the other movie?
So they no, we see the kids in both, but remember, these are not Anne's kids.
No, they're their kids.
No.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah. Eve is the daughter of the two of them. Anne is the au pair.
Wait, now I'm really confused.
So she Eve is Barbara's daughter.
Oh, wait, so they went from the first chapter to being in the auction, and then in the second chapter,
Yeah, so I was going to say they're jumping a lot quicker. But they're already in the kitchen. The part where she's doing. Remember how they talked about she was going to start her own business, doing like the pate and all that.
yeah.
Yeah, they're already here. And this is the person. Remember how they were doing that thing where they were bringing that lady in to like be a maid or whatever. Well, she's going to be an au pair in this, and they have
Oh.
kids that they're showing. That's what she's doing right here. She's meeting the daughter for the first time. She's feeling her out.
Oh. Wow, I was really confused.
Yeah, remember this chapter right here, the paragraph. She was, Anne observed, vulnerable and gawky, still underdeveloped and willowy, but with all the promise of inheriting her mother's sensuousness. With her father's blue eyes and rich, thick hair, she would soon be quite a beauty. Those are the two parents.
Hmm.
Yeah. Anne knew instinctively that to make it with Eve, she would have to find some important way to demonstrate her trust in the girl. You know, the story may be coming from the au pair instead of coming from Danny DeVito in the movie. Because we haven't that. Remember, that's how it is in the movie.
Right, right.
There's no mention of that stuff. Oh, you finally want to lay down, huh? You're done running around?
He probably destroyed the bathroom.
Yeah, she detested being so calculating as she searched for the opportunities to build trust. But it meant a great deal to win Eve's favor, especially in practical terms. Landing the job in the Roses household was a stroke of luck. Banishment, for whatever reason, would be a personal and financial disaster. The opportunity arose when Eve flunked math at Sidwell Friends School, a posh private school of Quaker origin for the children of the Washington elite. Eve, too frightened to tell her parents, confided the horror to Anne. I've disgraced them, she had cried. Pacifying her, Anne agreed to act as go-between, a role not without its risks. Jonathan had been disappointed but indifferent. Barbara had been angry. Lack of preparation is a curse, she had snapped. I know. Anne had learned by then that Barbara had married at 19 and dropped out of college. I promised them you'd go to summer school if there were no bad words or recriminations, Anne had announced proudly to Eve, who collapsed in shivery tears. The victory represented a turning point between them. I'll make them proud, Eve promised, her lips pursing in determination. Anne had discovered an invisible, fiercely competitive standard loose in the household, most prominently manifested in 12-year-old Josh. What he wanted most of all was to be a member of the Sidwell Friends junior varsity basketball team. She heard his basketball rattling against the backboard constructed by his father in the alley over the double garage with irritating punctuality. Like his sister, he was a well-made mixture of his parents' genes, hazel eyes, his mother's cheekbones, and an upper lip that would surely, in late adolescence, sprout his father's thick mustache. His hair, like his mother's chestnut, meant that he might not grow his father's salty, wavy hair. Like Eve, he wore braces. It was a family joke, one of many, that the roses were an orthodontist's dream. Anne's relationship with Josh started out vague and unpromising. She had barely any memories of prepubescent boys, having gone to a Catholic girls' school. To the stern sisters of that establishment, young boys, if they existed at all, were messengers of Satan. To Anne, Josh was a challenge to be surmounted. She found him one day hunched over his basketball on the third floor landing outside her room. She had been studying, and it was obvious when she saw him there, gloomy and distraught, that he had been waiting for her to come upon him accidentally. "You look like you just lost your best pal," she had said, standing over him. He was holding the basketball in a tight embrace. He looked up at her, dry-eyed, but with a visible trembling of his lower lip that threatened the total collapse of his pseudo-manly facade. She sat down beside him. "Damn, coach," he said, telegraphing that he had not made the team. It was enough of a signal to set her mind racing to find something reasonably reassuring to say. "Get a chance to play with any street kids?" He shrugged, obviously having no idea where she was leading him. "Go to the public basketball courts where the street kids play. Couple months of that, and you'll run rings around those private school pussies." He seemed to take in her words, still sulking as he brushed aside her attempted caress of his shoulders. It was weeks later, when he suddenly broke out in urban street talk, that she knew he had taken her advice. Pure chance, she knew, but a definite icebreaker. The sun, now barely visible through the arborvitaes, never heard of this plant, would soon be hidden behind the cedar fence, leaving a soft hush in the air. From the kitchen 2 floors below, exotic, mouth-watering aromas wafted upward. In the oven, Anne knew, was a crusting cassoulet, layers of simmering goose, pork, lamb, and sausage on a bed of flageolets, bubbling in an essence of garlic, thyme, bay leaves, and other glorious herbs and spices. Cooling on the marble of the kitchen island was a deep sniff quickly confirmed, a loaf of fluffy banana bread. Barbara was, at that moment, probably mixing a light salad of greens and mushrooms drenched with the tart oils of 1,000 experimented concoctions in the big wooden bowl. There would be sliced pâté de campagne, not champagne, pâté de campagne, as well as the chocolate mousse to sweeten the celebration.
I mean, I'm thinking that.
That just beeped, I think.
Yeah, I heard
okay, I
it.
was making sure you didn't fall asleep.
I know. I was listening to you. It sounded to me like champagne. Yes.
Yeah, but it didn't have an H or none of that good stuff in it. Now you're moving on to the
Hydrogen.
hydrogen. Okay, so that's 15 minutes.
Yep.
God's in his heaven and all's right with the world, Anne thought, prompted by the smells and the delectable knowledge of her treasure chest of Rose family secrets. The festivities were Barbara's original idea to celebrate Eve's summer school victory and a B- in advanced algebra. Anne had spent half the summer sweating over that one with Eve, certain that her efforts had ameliorated her academic performance by one whole letter jump. Jonathan had embellished the victory with his own contribution. He had bought Eve a silver Honda, which, unbeknownst to the young scholar, lay in wait in the garage next to his rarely used but fondled and caressed prize Ferrari. "You mustn't breathe a word," Jonathan had warned Anne. "Not a word." Barbara herself had come to her that morning with 2 secrets. "Josh made the team, but don't tell Jonathan. It's a surprise. We'll spring it at dinner." "You said 2 secrets. I just got a hell of an order. Chicken galantine for 24 for the Pax. They're entertaining the French ambassador on Tuesday night. Just don't tell Jonathan. I want it to be my surprise." Barbara took Anne by the shoulders, looked deeply into her eyes as if they were a mirror. "You know, I'm going to make it big as a caterer someday. I mean big. Eve came into her room sometime later with a further announcement, and Anne literally had to turn away to hide her amusement. You may think this dinner is for my B minus, but Dad's got a topper to that. The firm picked up one of those big Fortune 500 clients in New York. But don't tell Mom. When he breaks out the Chateau Lafite Rothschild 59, we're into heavy duty. Any more secrets, and Anne was certain that she would burst wide open. Surprisingly, she didn't feel left out. She had her own little secret, too. She was reminded of it again as she passed Jonathan on the back stairs. He had just come up from the sauna that he had built in the basement, complete with adjoining shower. Sometimes the family gathered there. Nudity was clearly not a hang-up, although, in defense to Anne's modesty, they no longer went about the house without robes. Anne turned quickly away as her eyes caught a tantalizing image. The dampness had curled Jonathan's hair, and the partially open terry cloth robe showed a profusion of jet black body turf down to his navel. She could not bring herself to look below that, and she could not ignore the piney scent exuding from him. The proximity with him half dressed was dizzying. So this is an au pair with this story is much different than the movie.
Yeah.
Soon, he said, winking as he passed her, I'm going to give Eve the Honda keys at dinner. In the kitchen, Barbara was wearing a long mauve velvet dress with a single strand of matched pearls, and even Eve, for once parted from her jeans, was preppy in her pleated skirt, blouse, and saddle shoes. As always, when it came to clothes, Anne felt inadequate, despite the fact that she wore one of Barbara's beige hand-me-down trousers. It was still a far cry from the J.C. Penney polyester she had worn that first day. As if by tacit consent, Anne picked up the cooling banana bread and joined the procession to the library, which doubled as a kind of family den. They moved through the marble-floored foyer, over which glistened a huge crystal chandelier hanging 3 stories high in a brass banister stairwell. From the corner of the foyer, a grandfather clock in an inlaid mahogany case sounded 7 chimes to underscore the Roman hour on its dial. Jonathan had built the walnut bookshelves in the library to hold their rows of leather-bound old volumes. Against a blank wall was a huge carved 19th century armoire 9 feet high, which he had fitted with shelves that now held an assortment of liquor. On the fireplace mantel was an array of Staffordshire figures. The collection was Jonathan's pride, and there were more than 50 figures arranged around the house: milkmaids, sailors, Napoleons, Garibaldis, Little Red Riding Hoods, and crude, rosy-cheeked farm boys.
These people love tchotchkes.
This place is like a museum.
I know.
On a marble table in the foyer were displayed what had become the legendary Crib and Molyneux Staffordshire figurines, poised in their internal pugilistic confrontation. The story of Jonathan and Barbara's first meeting had been repeated in the household ad infinitum. Over the library fireplace hung a large English oil painting, a hunting scene, complementing the leather Chesterfield couch and matching chairs in front of it. Barbara admitted it was eclectic, but perfect for Sunday dinners spent squatting around a heavy, low oak rent table on the blue and red Sarouk Persian rug. I don't know if that's right. It seems to be the only time we're all together, Barbara told Anne, offering a mysterious, wistful, out-of-character look. By the time Jonathan arrived, with Josh trailing smugly behind, the platters of cassoulet and pâté and the big wooden bowl of salad had been laid out. An unsuspecting Eve picked at the banana bread and dropped little morsels in her mouth. The family soon gathered around the table, and Jonathan, with great ceremony, poured the Chateau Lafite Rothschild 59 into crystal wine glasses. He looked about, offering a cryptic smile, winking at Barbara, and lifting his glass. Before we dine on this magnificent repast, he announced, we must toast to this moment of triumph. He looked at Eve, who smiled broadly, 2 rouge-like puffs of excitement on each apple cheekbone. B- will not an A make, but it's a hell of a long way from F, Josh snickered. He always brought home straight A's. It was not above teasing his sister on that score. And a long way from H. H? Eve asked, squinting in bemusement. H for Honda, Jonathan said. Honda? Eve looked at the faces around the table in confusion. Jonathan raised his glass higher and from his pocket drew out a set of keys and his garage door control. Just don't hit the Ferrari on your way out. Not if you value your life, Barbara joked. Eve squealed hysterically with joy, grabbing her father around the neck, kissing him with passionate gratefulness. She repeated the ritual with Barbara, then with Josh and Anne, finally picking up the keys and remote control and dashing out toward the rear of the house. We're spoiling her rotten, Jonathan said when she had gone, bringing the rim of the wine glass to his lips. But it feels so damn good. We didn't get our first car until 3 years after we were married, Barbara said. Different times, Jonathan shrugged. Why all the hard work if not for this? His free arm gestured towards all the visible surroundings and the company present. I made the team, Josh said suddenly, as if a bubble had suddenly burst inside him. Damn, Jonathan said, putting down his glass and high-fiving him. Bad, man. He had picked up some of the street jargon from Josh. I'll drink to that, Josh said, lifting his glass again and swilling down the expensive wine as if it were Coca-Cola. At the sound of horn blasts, the family gathered around the window. Eve had driven her new Honda around to the front of the house. She then sped off as the family waved. Lucky bitch, Josh said. Well, now it makes a car obligatory for you when you hit 16, Jonathan said. You now have a standard. That's what fatherhood means, setting standards. He laughed at his own little joke. Then the family reassembled around the table. I'm surprised they let her just drive off before dinner. There are other family victories to announce, Barbara said quietly, her eyes smiling.
Oh, is Eve not back?
She just took off. You didn't hear that?
Yeah, I thought she was just circling around to the front.
Yeah, she said, the family gathered on the window. Eve had driven her new Honda around to the front of the house, period. She then sped off as the family waved.
Oh.
I'm assuming that means she drove off.
Yeah, I guess. Interesting.
There are other family victories to announce, Barbara said quietly, her eyes smiling in their deep sockets, her full hips curling tremendously over her white teeth. Oh, lips.
Wait, I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
I was like, man, this book is really overtly sexual, much more than the movie. She made her announcement in a flat, somewhat restrained tone, but with a determined flourish. There seemed an unsettling note of bravado in it as well, although Anne felt she was the only one who appeared to notice. Jonathan moved closer to Barbara and kissed her on the lips. Fantastic, he said as Anne quickly turned away, annoyed at her unexpected burst of jealousy. I guess what I have to say is anticlimactic, Jonathan said, just as Eve burst through the front door, flushed with joy. It runs like a dream, she cried, squatting beside Anne and squeezing her hand. I'm so happy. So I guess she did come back. She was just taking it for a little spin. Anne lifted a finger to Eve in mock rebuke as Jonathan continued. Just a new client, more lucre for the family coffers, a huge retainer. My colleagues are quite pleased with my resourcefulness. I'm off to New York tomorrow to seal the deal. More kisses were exchanged, and soon everybody was digging into the feast, mumbling ecstatically, their mouths full of Barbara's wonderful cooking. They all agreed that the food was perfectly complemented by the rich taste and bouquet of the Chateau Latif Rothschild 59. The rich cassoulet melted in her mouth. Anne could not help but compare the splendor with her own shabby family, locked in the prison of their tiny wood frame home in Johnstown. More like Dog Patch, she thought, where the big treat was snaring Polish sausages with a bent fork from a big jug and gulping down six-packs. Her memories, like a movie in her mind, froze into a single ghastly frame. In it, her mother's swollen body squirmed like jelly in a neglected, flowered housecoat as she reclined on a sprung, worn couch in front of the television set, gun-muzzled curlers poised to shoot out Laverne and Shirley, while her father, with his beer belly hanging over his belt, added cigar ash dust to the frayed carpet from which sprouted his Archie Bunker chair.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Suddenly, as if to start the reel moving again, she tapped her wine glass with a silver spoon, the tinkling crystal commanding their silence. I can't tell you how much the words stuck in her throat, and she had to clear it and begin again. I can't tell you how much it has meant to me to be here with you. You cannot imagine. She stumbled again, the images of her past life too vivid for the oncoming rush of words. Her gaze washed over each face, even Jonathan's, which she now viewed without the earlier shame. It's been the most wonderful time of my life, the way you've taken me in and become my family. She swallowed hard. Such a happy family. She shook her head, too overcome to continue, then searched with her lips to find the rim of the glass, which she tipped. What a happy house, Anne thought to herself, thinking about her good fortune in finding them. End scene. That's the end of chapter 2.
Does it really say end scene?
No, I was just saying that to end so you knew it was the end of the chapter.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure.
No, she's surprised at how happy they are. But we can make this. How much time you got left?
I have 5 minutes.
Oh, easy. There's only 4 pages in chapter 3.
My microphone fell off.
Oh, no. Now nobody can hear you read.
Oh well.
I'm reading.
I know you're reading.
I'm sure you can still be heard.
Okay.
Chapter 3. Jonathan felt the first stab of pain just as Chairman Larrabee finished talking, an orientation lecture really outlining the company's problem with the Federal Trade Commission. Jonathan had been taking notes on a yellow legal pad, and his pencil started to make jiggling swirls as if it were writing independently. They were seated around a conference table in the chairman's office in New York, and he'd already had a few more cups of coffee before lunch than was his custom. At first, he tried to dismiss the pain, but when he broke out in a cold sweat, a charge of panic gripped him. Jonathan put down his pencil and tried to cover up the stabbing discomfort with a cough. Then Larrabee began to direct his remarks to Jonathan, but his words began to sound muffled, incoherent, and far away. It is the universal dread to be struck down suddenly in the middle of some important event. Bladder and bowels would void, there would be vomiting, but worst of all, he would be inconveniencing everybody around him, all of whom couldn't care less. There was the perennial joke about clean underwear, just in case. You feel all right, Rose? Larrabee asked. Jonathan managed a nod, but knew it was unconvincing. Someone poured him a glass of water from a silver pitcher, but he couldn't get it down. This is ridiculous, he whispered. He was led to a leather couch where he lay down and managed to open his collar and loosen his tie. I'm sure it will pass, he croaked. That, too, seemed unconvincing. The stabs of pain were becoming an onslaught behind his breastbone. His color stinks, someone said. He felt a hand on his forehead, cold as ice. Then he heard someone say ambulance and realized that his sensory powers were becoming numb. His heart seemed ready to break out of his ribcage. His mind raced back and forth in time and memory, and he wondered if he were the proverbial drowning man watching his life pass before him, like watching a film in quadruple time. This is stupid, he heard himself say, although he knew that the words had not been spoken. You'll be fine, Larrabee said. What the heck? You ready for this? Unctuously. I can't even say it right. Unctuously. You ever heard that? Larrabee said there's no
UNCT?
yeah, there's no vowel in between C and T. Unctuously. I'll have to look that up.
Okay.
Jonathan had detested the man immediately and resented his show of concern. I'm only 40, he thought, as panic turned to self-pity. He prayed most of all he wouldn't soil his pants, remembering old admonitions from his childhood. There they were, the first signs. What galled him, too, was his lack of planning, and he wondered if he had paid all his insurance premiums. The insurance man had assured him that if he died at 40, his family would get $1 million. Jonathan had snickered at the idea then, choosing term instead of whole life. How can I die, he thought. My parents are still living. My grandparents, on both sides, died in their 80s. Then he counted all the people he would be letting down, which only aggravated him further. Jonathan lost total track of time as he lay there. Someone covered him with a blanket, but he still felt icy. You'll be fine, the chairman said, his jolly face flushed with what could have been either concern or annoyance. I've blown the first big meeting with a new client, Jonathan thought, imagining gossip amongst his colleagues in the firm. Poor old Jonathan, sorry son of a bitch. 2 anesthetic-smelling, white-jacketed attendants lifted him onto a wheeled stretcher. He saw an oxygen mask coming quickly towards him. He also saw his own finger crooking in front of his eyes, beckoning. Larrabee's face came closer. Call my wife, Jonathan croaked. The oxygen mask was clapped over his face, and he felt the moving wheels below him. Then the swirl of outdoor sounds and the ear-splitting siren as the ambulance shot forward. An icy stethoscope startled Jonathan's sudden bare chest. Am I going to die? He whispered futilely into his mask. He burped, and after a moment's relief, the pain started again. His mind had cleared, then he became introspective as he pictured Barbara's tear-stained face and even Josh hovering over him, awaiting the exact moment of his demise, a death watch. Oh yeah, didn't he just have like acid reflux or something?
Is that what it was? I don't
Yeah,
remember.
he didn't even have a heart attack. I don't think he had like some kind of just really bad reflux. I've let them down, he rebuked himself. In fact, a flood of letdowns careened in the spillway of his anxiety-ridden mind. Who would feed Benny? Who would turn the wine, care for the orchids, wind the tall mahogany clock? Who would repair the broken appliances, watch over the antiques, the paintings, the Staffordshire figures, and who would tune up the Ferrari? How dare they take away his passions, his possessions from him? The idea was almost as unbearable as the pain. He felt a prick in his arm, and soon the pain eased somewhat. He was floating in space, like an astronaut in a space capsule. Some horrible nightmare nudged at his consciousness, but he couldn't recall it, only the feeling that it had been dreadful. Then he sensed the floor moving under him as the wheels bumped along a corridor. Above him, the ceiling was lined with fluorescent white lights. The glare stung his eyes. He could vaguely feel them hooking him up to something. In the distance, he heard rhythmic blipping sounds of medical equipment. Nearby, hovering around him, were hushed voices. If they could get Barbara in time, he knew that everything would be fine. His life depended on Barbara. He would not die if Barbara came. When they removed the oxygen mask, he whispered again, "Call my wife. Call Barbara." That's the end of chapter 3.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So that part I do remember from the movie.
Right. That did occur, but he was at a dinner.
Yeah. And she doesn't come.
It was with the new client though. Yeah, we don't know if she comes in this one either.
Yeah,
The next chapter is relatively short too, but I think you're going to be out of time.
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, you're done.
Yep.
Okay. That's the end. That's the end of Pillow
Hour
this time.
Aw,
Now it's tea time.
the kitty is
Kat?
asleep.